sponsor for confirmation. Brother David.
Oh my goodness.
It's got to be a very difficult position.
We've got problems there too. You're talking about privatizing, and I'm for privatizing.
It might run a little better. Our veterans might get the support that they need.
Schenectady City Council Committee meeting to order for Monday, July 17, 2023. The first thing on the agenda is the Finance Committee.
Thank you. I would like to call the Finance Committee to order, and one item is just follow-up ARPA contract. Mr. Ferrari.
Thank you, Madam President, City Council, Mayor. I had emailed you these copies of what I put on in front of you. I figured you guys would like a hard copy. And what I put together here is the organization, the project, a description of the project, the amount that was appropriated, the appropriation date, and any contingencies or progress as we go along. As you can see, we are making progress every week. We're getting closer and closer to contracts every week. We're working with Seat Network very close. We're with the Schenectady Foundation. It's any day now. So every time we're getting closer and closer making contact. One of the things, the Hamilton Arts Studio, they get their commitment as far as we know, and we're right at the process where we're going to be getting ready to go out to bid for that. We're still working a bit with the Miracle on Craig Street. We're going to meet sometime this week or next week. We're going to try to get all the plans together so we can go out to bid just to see where we are with that. Two of the things I want to bring up. One of them was we had very close to running a contract with Proctor's, and what we're doing with Proctor's Theater is that what we saw was that as we're gathering all the paperwork, I asked them, I go, just let me see your expenses that you're going to submit, so I want to make sure they seem to be valid. And what I found, and I wanted to bring it up to the council, was that the work that was done, in which they did do the handless faucets, the toilets, and the air handles, that was all done and paid for before they even sent the application out for ARPA. So, they were granted that. So we were preparing a contract, and I was talking with our attorney, and says, geez, will we have to make the contract go back a year earlier to 2021? Where actually, they applied in December of 21, and they didn't get funded until actually August of 22. But the work was done in August and September of 21. So that is one of the things that I wanted to find out. I did ask them if they had other expenses at least after December, at least after the application. So as of yet, they have not brought anything back. But I just wanted to bring this out to the council. I don't know how you guys want to handle that or whatever, and the decision you got to make. And of course, in the paper today, there was another article about the aquatic center. I guess it's a definite move to Rotterdam, but I guess they still feel that we should give them the appropriation. So that's something maybe you guys are going to have to discuss among you to see if you're going to fall through on that. If you're not, what we're going to do with the funds as we get it back. As I'm looking through here, and as you look through the thing for contingency, there's some of them that doesn't look like that's ever going to happen. Like the YWCA getting $21 million for their one thing. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the Cocoa House getting the $3.5 million for their things. I didn't speak to them as of yet, but I'm just saying it doesn't look like within the next couple of months. Well, August, actually. No, one more month, right? August and September, that they're going to be able to get those funds. So I just want to bring this out to let you guys know, because there's probably something that has to come up to the table. Probably going to need further discussion, and also what we're going to do when we get this money back. Of course, I have a lot of ideas, but it's really up to you guys, right? Mm-hmm. I'll take any questions that I can answer if you have any.
Go ahead, please.
So could you clarify again about the Proctor's project? So they did the work before they put in the grant application?
Correct.
So the work, I'm just
They did the work and they paid for it before the application.
Before 2021.
They applied in December 2021. They paid for everything as of September of 21.
So we were basically reimbursing them for the project, is what, did we know that when we?
I looked at the application. They had told me they spoke to someone here and they said it was okay, but they didn't give me a name, so I really know how that goes, right? And it's, through my experience, it's probably something they would just say, But yeah.
As far as
Yeah.
the finance commissioner, do you have a recommendation with respect to how we should proceed with that?
Well, yeah, I have a biased recommendation only because of how much I like Proctor's, but it's for me. I think it's a difficult decision. I think it's something, like I said, that's why it has to be brought up to you guys. You can tell me which way to go. I think it's in the realm that we can do that. We'll just have to make their contract reflect that. Like their contract would have to go back to August of 2021. Can we do that, Chris?
We would have to do something a little different to accommodate for this particular.
Yeah, if you would do that. And it's something that, that has to be thought out.
Yeah, this is more of a reimbursement base.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a different type of contract.
Yeah, it's different.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
What did their application say they were going to do? Is that clear in the application?
With their application, what they said the application would do, that's what they actually did. They got the handless faucets, they got the handless toilets, they got the air dryers, they got all that stuff.
But they never said, but we already did all this, and we've already paid for all this.
And like I said, I have to read it again. I look at the numbers more than we did this already, or the wording as much as maybe an attorney could look at it closer. But I will review it again. Just as something I brought up that I thought was a little different. I go, got caught on this one.
Yeah, could you get more information on that?
Absolutely.
If it's paid for before they even submitted it, was it a double grant? Are they double trying to get two pieces of the pie? So that's important for us to know.
Absolutely. And I'll keep in contact. I'm in contact with them, and I'll just keep moving along. But I just wanted to let you know this as moving. I don't want you to hear it from, I don't know, if anything else,
Last cycle you mentioned about the aquatic center, we can't fund any project outside of the city. Is that the same today? That we can't fund nothing outside of the city using the ARPA funding?
Well, because it's not a city project, can we? There's always ways around everything, I don't think it's, according to what our proposals was, this has to be in the city. That's the way we wrote it up to be, city projects,
Okay. Go ahead, please.
About the YWCA,
Yeah.
you said that they don't, they're,
Yeah,
I mean, I thought that
one we already have a
still
contract
in
with in front of them. The second one where, let me just find them, the YMCA. The second one where they have a contingency of getting of grants of 21 point something million dollars.
Okay, that's a different one, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Requires additional commitments of $21.25 million by September
I see.
September 22nd. That is for the Harbor House.
The YW project was originally put in as what's classified as a 9% tax incentive deal. Those are highly competitive. We were given one award to go for the project on Crane Street. I still believe that deal is very viable, but it should be structured probably at a 4% tax deal, which is not a competitive program, but it's a negotiated package, so that we can put that together and still make that happen. I'm not sure it'll all come together by the end of this timeline.
September 22nd is the timeline.
Have something, a framework in place that would, again, serve their needs, and I believe the state is sympathetic to that project and making it go forward in some fashion. But just the financing is going to have to be restructured. And maybe, Madam President, we can sit down and talk in the near future about some of those options and how is best to, again, structure the financing to make it happen.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, please.
I have a question on, it's the, let's see, the youth baseball revitalization. It says that the work has been started on Michigan Avenue field.
Yes, we just went on Michigan Avenue, we got the bid for the wall. Chris is not here today, but we got the bid in, so we're gonna put in the wall, then we're gonna do the infill, the build to put, where they're gonna put the picnic tables and stuff on that. So that is in starting, you know.
But a lot of the work's already been done because we were there for.
Well, some of the works have been done, yeah. But this is the big stuff, you know, that was just to clean up a little stuff.
Okay, and so what about the Oregon Avenue part of this? So how much has been spent and will there be any money left to do that part of it? It says Oregon Avenue and Michigan Avenue.
Yeah. I have not received anything on the Oregon Avenue park, as far as I know. Like again, Chris Wallen is handling that, and he's not here tonight. He did not mention Oregon Avenue to me when we were discussing these things, so.
Okay. Oh, I noticed that it's written in there as part of it, but it doesn't say anything's happening over here.
Any other questions from Mr. Ferraro?
So I know that previously you were saying that you were having some trouble contacting certain, people or certain agencies. Is there any agencies that you're still just having issues with, even getting in contact with as far as conversation?
The Kiwanis Club, I seem not to be able to get a hold of them too well. The Kiwanis Club, and what's the other one? God, off the top of my head. Actually, it was Kiwanis Club. There was the Miracle on Craig Street, but I did finally get a hold of somebody over there. So I got that going. Working around with the Empowerment Center, so that, breaking through with that. What is the pastor at the Cocoa House now? We just got contact with him. So we were starting to make waves to doing that. Yeah. Because you were here talking on TV, they're hearing me and they're contacting me. Yeah. So guys from Kiwanis and stuff like that, if you hear me, call me. We got to get those picnic tables done before the end of summer.
During the legislative conference, we talked about maybe sending out letters to the agencies.
Right.
They're not getting back to you. Is that something that?
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be great. Yeah. That's something we're going to start doing. We're going to start processing the letters and have the law department approve them before we send them out. Okay. Yeah. All right. And they're going to be very nice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Everybody's okay?
Yeah. So the next. Well, I'll send an email about what we can have next time, so we can kind of have a grasp on what's going to be. That's
what we're doing. We're as we're going with these process. Kristen and Maurice, they're doing a great job. They're really pushing at everything too, and we're getting things done.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ferrari.
You're welcome.
That.
Would you like to have this back in 2 weeks? In the next cycle?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business before finance?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order City Development and Planning. We have 4 items on the agenda. The first item is to authorize the abandonment and sale of a portion of Larch Street. It has Mr. Wallen, but okay. Mr. Wallen has someone here to represent him tonight. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Mr. Wallen had a prior engagement, so. All right, so Larch Street is located between 633 and 651 Lansing Street. It's a small dead-end street. This street also serves no current greater benefit to the public. The abandonment and sale of this property should not detriment the city in any way. Conversely, the sale will help foster maintenance of the land that is currently being neglected. As such, there was a public hearing held on Monday, April 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in order to receive public comments. And related to the abandonment, we did not receive any comments, so we are requesting authorization to abandon and the sale of a portion of Larch Street. And we also provided just 3 maps so you can see how that's outlined. So the first map shows the full street as it would be parceled out, and then the second map shows what the new property for the adjacent neighbor on the left would be, outlined, and then the new parcel for the property on the right side, and how that would be lined up. Any questions?
Questions? Anyone? I'll entertain a motion.
So,
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. The next item on the agenda is discussion of zoning of cannabis shops and possible moratorium on smoke shops. You'll see the legislative request in your packet. So you just read through it, but part of the reason, we talked about this kind of in January when we were talking about certificate of use for various stores, and out of that came some legislation that was being done by the law department that we all got back in January, and cannabis was a part of that. And in addition to that, there was a list that was generated of, they were called kind of convenience stores, but it was a list of 28 stores. And if you recall, almost all of them had the name smoke shop in the name of it. And that was generated in January. So how many have happened in the last 6 months? Not really sure. Given the fact that they are fully funded now to do the CURD operators, which is the conditional use, the social justice part of it, which initially was going to only be 150, now they've gone to 300. And so, as you can see in the legislative request, the DASNY, Dormitory Authority, is really talking about pushing out and really getting more of these open. So in light of that, I asked Mr. Marty if we could meet and talk about it, because we want to be prepared to be able to have a zone where these can and cannot happen in the city of Schenectady. When we initially talked about it, about passing it, that we were talking about whether we should opt out, do the zoning first. It didn't happen like that. So we're at a point where we do currently have one that's open that has drawn some concerns from the community. So going forward, it anticipate there will be others. So we really want to make sure that we have some zoning in place to take care of that, so that people know where they can and cannot have it. And part of our discussion also covered the smoke shops. As I think we can all see, and I've heard from many people that they're just popping up all over the city of Schenectady. And part of that, I've heard, I don't know if to be true or not, is that people anticipate that if they have a smoke shop, they can almost like just glide right into a cannabis shop. So that was part of our discussion in terms of the zoning. So I would ask Mr. Marnie to tell us about what the state says and what we can do, and then we can have some further discussion.
Sure. So, at least with respect to cannabis, there is a lot with respect to zoning that has been preempted by the state, so we cannot regulate certain aspects of the cannabis use. But what we are able to regulate are the kind of the time, place, manner restrictions. So while we can't do anything with respect to the 1,000-foot rule that you may have heard about, we can determine what zones cannabis sales are going to be permitted in, specifically, we can do what's called kind of a zoning overlay, because we may not want to apply it to all of the commercial districts, but there may be certain areas within the commercial districts that we want to apply to. Many of our commercial areas, they do tend to bleed into a residential zoning district. So months and months ago, when we met with development, the planners had been looking at a zoning overlay, which would be kind of an adult use zoning use overlay over the major commercial corridors. So we do have some control over, with respect to the cannabis uses, what they look like as well. Just like we do with any other zoning with respect to commercial enterprise, what the shop is going to look like. I will say the state is already very, very restrictive as to what a licensee, their shop can look like. There's no paraphernalia that can be visible. There's no cannabis leaves that can be visible. Our flexibility with respect to smoke shops, vape shops, hookah consumption, tobacco consumption, much, much more flexible, because there is no state preemption, there is no state licensing for that. So we could, in fact, impose restrictions on the distance that those shops are from each other, that the distance that those shops are from schools and churches and other similar uses. We would largely, the recommendation would be to parallel the state definitions for cannabis uses in our own zoning code and kind of follow course for that, and then we can apply those similar restrictions to the smoke, the vape, the hookah lounges, and ultimately the goal of zoning, we want to treat similar uses similarly. So we don't want to treat them separately. Those are similar uses. They should be treated together. I know that there was a discussion to a moratorium for those uses, and that would serve as a halt to prevent any further applications going through until the zoning was in place. Ultimately, to do that really is a conversation for the council to have. It is considered a drastic remedy, and there are a lot of restrictions that need to be in place and a lot of things that we need to bake into the ordinance to ensure that we are doing it lawfully. Typically, though, a moratoria is used if we're concerned that there's going to be some sort of mass development rush. Like the city was proposing major zoning changes, and we were worried that all of the developers were going to rush to City Hall to pull permits and try to acquire what we would call a vested right in that project. So there may or may not be a concern that that's going to be the case here for smoke shops and hookah lounges and cannabis uses, especially considering how onerous the licensing is for cannabis. That being said, it is within the council's power to enact a moratorium on these uses. It just is going to need to be for a reasonable amount of time for us to put the zoning in place. 6 months would probably be more than enough time. And in fact, many of these changes are really minor tweaks. I will point out that at least as it stands today, the only cannabis use that is permitted under our zoning code is the sale of cannabis, the retail use. We do not have a use defined for consumption, and in the world of zoning, if we do not have a use it is not permitted. If it's not a specifically stated use, it is not a permitted use. So that currently wouldn't be permitted, and trying to think if there's anything I left out, but yeah, I mean, as it stands now, it's retail. So largely, what we would be looking at is parking. I think that the queuing is something that has come up as a concern for members of the public, so we could have some language in there for that. The likelihood is that as it becomes a more common use, we'll probably see less of that being an impact, the queuing outside of the businesses. Many of the smoke shops that we are perhaps hearing about have not gone through the land use approval process anyway. So I just want to be very, very clear that zoning is not what we would use to combat illegal sales of cannabis. That's not really what zoning is going to do. That's still a law enforcement matter. And many of those smoke shops that have opened, or vape shops, they don't have approvals to operate anyway. They don't have site plan approval. They don't have a certificate of use. So these are mechanisms that we have in place already. It's just a matter of enforcement. But certainly we can put in place zoning that specifically speaks to these uses to ensure that the parking and some of those other effects are ameliorated.
Anybody questions, comments? Yes?
We submitted a legislative request, and it's got a recommendation proposal for zoning for cannabis shops, just as a starter for discussion. And it would put the establishments in M1 and M2 districts, would have language similar to that of the state as far as what it can be near. The idea behind the M1 and M2, very similar in nature to the adult bookstores, but beyond that, there's plenty of parking there. Wouldn't really interfere with other small businesses. There's plenty of space. So the issues that maybe we're having currently on Union Street wouldn't happen in other areas, so in the industrial zones. So that's what my proposal is, to put them in those areas. I think it would limit the impact on the residents in the neighborhoods who are near the smoke shops, near the cannabis shop, excuse me, and would help alleviate a lot of the issues that we're seeing.
So where are the M1s and the M2s in the city right now?
I believe one is on Maxon Road, another one on the bottom of Broadway Hill. I don't know all of them, but
So would that carve out downtown entirely?
I believe it carved out most, if not all, of downtown.
Okay.
My thought there is why we have a downtown which we're trying to make family friendly. Why would we want to have a cannabis shop there? We can have it in other areas. People can partake and do what they want with the cannabis and still be legal and still not impact others. So it would be allow people to partake in a legal activity but also not impact other commercial operations.
So, Mr. Marnie, does that in any way conflict with or anything in terms of the state? I mean, I think we should take a real deep look into that in terms of that. That's very limiting.
No. So the council has the authority to determine what zones are. What you cannot do is eliminate it. It has to be allowed somewhere. I would say, with respect to surviving kind of a constitutional challenge, you have to treat similar uses similarly. So the cannabis should be treated the same as tobacco because they are similar uses. So tobacco, I would say, and what many of the definitions tend to pin it on is what is their primary source of income at retail is, we don't want, if it's a grocery store that sells cigarettes, that's not the same as a smoke shop that sells vape supplies and tobacco supplies or else. So those uses are largely similar to the cannabis zoning and largely should be kept together. But as far as what district they're permitted in, wholly the choice of the council, as long as they are permitted somewhere. It's largely, it was similar to adult uses as well. This was when it came up in the 70s where municipalities tried to zone them out. And the case law is that you have to allow them somewhere, which is usually the manufacturing districts.
Yes.
So I also had put forth some legislation. And it's kind of-
Just to be clear, I know that you guys are saying there was legislation. I already put this on the agenda, and those came afterwards. I just want
Right, well,
to
this
be
is
clear.
just, my...
Yeah, I just want no one to think that why it wasn't included in their
I think
package.
we're all on the same page here, so I just want to pass this around. Absolutely. So something that's very special to me that I'd like to see a moratoria on smoke shop, vape shops. There's enough for everyone, I believe, there's one here in the city. My recommendation would be, as Mr. Marty stated a few moments ago, like a 6-month pause so we can get together and see, prevent these smoke shops from popping up on every corner, vape shops. There's also attached here, Governor Hochul, on the last page, there's actually printed on her cutting down smoke shops and vape shops down in New York City. Not saying that it's happening here, but there's a lot of illegal marijuana sales and coming out of these shops that are just popping up with all the paraphernalia there. Another huge thing is youth vaping, probably 9 years old on up, 10, 11, 12. There's some studies that I've got here about 27% of 12th graders have reported vaping in 2022. It's not good for any of them, and it's not good for us, and I don't think it should be available 3 in every neighborhood where you can go in and do this. Another thing is I do have, if anyone wants me to send them, I realized that the town of Bethlehem had filed a local law with the New York State Department of State for a moratorium on vape shops. And of course, this would all be from the legal department, moving forward, should we. But I thought interesting, and it's the purpose of the local law to fulfill the town, city's constitutional, statutory, and legal obligations to protect and preserve the public health, welfare, and safety of all the citizens of the city. And to me, that's a lot of the youth as well as everyone else. and you can't make your own decisions. So I just wanted to bring this forward because I have been working on it for a while, so I present this to you as well. Thank you. And President Porter.
So Mr. Marnie brings up again about the moratorium. So, I mean, we can have a discussion regarding that. We did do one on convenience stores. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it'd been so long ago, but it's been a number of years. I think 2014 is when we did that. But there's got to be specific reasons, as you said. So we would need to be able to discuss that. And talking about the current stores that we have, though, you made a point to say some of these stores don't even have a certificate of use. So, for me, part of I think what we should be doing is looking at all the stores that we have on our list and the more that are not on the list to see if they don't, and to remedy that, whether it means that they get shut down or whatever that it means, but to just be able to open a business without going through the correct process with the city should not be happening. And they shouldn't be able to. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Naeem is on vacation this week, but he had sent officers out last Wednesday or Thursday citing some of these businesses that are non-compliant to get them started that process. And I don't know how many we actually cited, but again, it's starting that process to identify them and to get them into compliance.
And part of their compliance, they have to have a permit by New York State to be. I know that we've been to in times past, we've been to stores that were selling tobacco that didn't have the permit to even to sell it. So that
each one is a different story. Some have some level of compliance, some have pretty much no compliance. And how do we go through identifying them and where we want businesses to be here, want them to play by the rules. Again, don't want businesses that create an adverse environment for adjacent businesses or property owners.
Thank you. Mr. Farley.
So I think if we're talking about kind of Mr. Martin's point around treating use similarly, then I think that it would be wise of us to really pay attention to the social justice aspect of cannabis, and to make sure that we're not, that we're factoring that in, as far as, especially if we're talking about zoning, and a lot of the thought behind this was to right the historical wrongs and the marginalized peoples from marginalized communities who have lives have been impacted, adversely impacted, disproportionately impacted. So I think that's something that we have to keep in that's the lens we need to look through if we're going to talk about zoning and or even the compliance that we have, because it seems like we're talking about using existing things that we have in the city, but being intentional about our smoke shops. So I'm just thinking about that and is that something that we want to just look at? All of the businesses that are operating without the appropriate certificates or out of compliance. I just think about when we start to narrow the focus. I just don't want to have any unintended consequences of being disproportionate in how we're moving forward.
The building inspector's word choice was he was having staff do every business, look at them for compliance. So some of them tended to be the newer smoke shops that had just shown up that are more of a problem, but looking for compliance across the board.
Mr. Williams?
And I was just going to add, I think we're talking about two different things, or what it was presented by Ms. Toro. If we're looking at the regulations aspect of identifying these zoning overlays, but then also where is that in comparison to enforcement, which are two completely separate things, and also looking at the scalability of our response. Mr. Marnie, you can absolutely jump in if you'd like. It sounded as if you were identifying that a moratorium was an overt response that was particularly not necessary unless we were anticipating a huge influx of developers, which you said was not the case with our city.
It is legally considered a very drastic remedy, but it is wholly up to the council to determine whether or not they feel it's warranted in this situation. There's 5 large criteria that we have to meet. It has to be a reasonable time frame. There has to be valid public purpose. It has to address a situation that is being shared substantially by the public at large. And there's a strict procedure that we have to adhere to, and it has to have a time certain. So the law looks disfavorably upon, kind of, multiple extensions and kind of kicking that can down the road. But ultimately, whether or not to pursue that is going to be up to the council. They can direct the law department to draft that ordinance, and it would largely parallel the Bethlehem ordinance that appears to be very well researched, and there are templates that we have access to do that.
As far as the moratorium goes, I think it's reasonable to make it 6 months or less, whatever that would be. But it would allow the city the opportunity to go through, find the businesses that are not operating legally, have them addressed. It would also allow the council time to figure out a zoning issue for smoke shops. So I think that is a reasonable time frame. Whether it's 6 months, 3 months, whatever, but that would allow those activities to be done without new smoke shops opening. There's complaints all the times at the neighborhood meetings of just in Bellevue alone, there's 6. Goose Hill, there's a whole pile. I'm sure every neighborhood there's a bunch, and people are complaining about these being opened. As far as the zoning for the cannabis shops, I believe there's case law that would be in our favor. I don't remember it, but I can get that. Would be in our favor for the zoning of M1, M2. Again, plenty of parking, wouldn't interfere with other commercial areas. They're relatively easy to get to in terms of transportation. So I understand some of your concerns, but I think some of those are alleviated with the ability to get there relatively easy and still partake in a legal activity. So I think that's a reasonable thing. The city's done it before. It's nothing new. The same with the moratorium, and I think they're worth considering.
Yes, Mr. Brown?
So I would just say, so the concerns that I had are aligned with kind of what the state's doing right now, and I think that because the city has done things before, I don't know that the city has always operated with what we would deem a equitable lens. I'm not saying that it hasn't, but I will say that it hasn't always done that. So being that this is a kind of a new industry, and a lot of the reason why this industry is now existing is to right some of those historical wrongs, then I just think that it's really important that we don't use the same maybe existing metric in order to measure if we're being equitable or not. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so is it the opinion of the council generally that you want to move forward looking at having the law department look at a moratorium on smoke shops? What is discussion around that?
I think it's definitely reasonable to look at it. Again, I'm just reiterating the fact that if we're going to treat similar things similarly, we have to acknowledge that there is some more factors that we have to be considering, and those factors are around equitable access and ability to participate in this growing economy, in this new industry.
I thought you were, when you were talking about the equitable access, you were really talking about the cannabis.
Well, right. But what I'm saying is that Mr. Marnes was saying that to treat similar things similarly. Mm-hmm. So if we are treating them similarly, then I just want to make sure that we're using the equitable lens. That's all.
Because we're not talking about a moratorium on opening cannabis. Okay.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
just so you know. All right, okay. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Money, so when you said treat similar, so was it just like not a supermarket selling tobacco? So I think, is it what you meant, the smoke shop selling tobacco versus another small individual, something just selling tobacco?
Largely
tobacco
different.
Right, so it's, right?
Yeah, like a grocery
Bigger.
store selling cigarettes is very different
A
from
percentage of.
a hookah
right.
store or cannabis retail
Right.
lounge. So those similar uses
Sure.
we want, but we're not going to lump in,
Right.
Stewart's isn't going to be, part of it. They sell cigarettes, but that's not their primary source of income at retail.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Farley?
So how do you, just a question, like, is there a formula around like how we could understand like what their primary source of income is? Right? Like, because I'm just not really clear. Like, I mean, if you say like Joe's Smoke Shop, I think it's a pretty fair assumption to say it's a smoke shop, but outside of, is there something, existing that we could?
It's largely baked into the definitions for those specific uses, and the goal is to try to capture businesses that's really not their primary use. Sometimes it's percentage based. I think we did a very similar definition with the certificate of use section, which I believe I have somewhere, but so we had defined it just as saying that it's premises for cannabis, cannabinoid, nicotine, tobacco are sold for consumption on the premises, or where these products or related paraphernalia are the primary source of income at retail. And then such premises include cannabis or tobacco retail stores, smoke shops, vape shops, hookah lounges, consumption lounges, and the like. As of now, we have very specific definitions of at least the cannabis uses that the state has provided for their legislation, which we would largely use them to parallel those.
But not so much for the smoke shops.
No,
Okay.
not for smoke shops.
Okay.
Mr. Toro?
Thank you. I can send this to Samantha and have her send out, I think you have it, the copy of the Town of Bethlehem local law filing. This might help you, Mr. Farley, is vape shops, they define as a retail outlet with 25% or more of its retail space devoted to selling, distributing any electronic cigarette, vapor product, etc. They came up with a description for a smoke shop, a retail space solely devoted to selling or distributing any tobacco or electronic, and then of course it goes into the cannabis. And those two things might help, and I can send a copy to Sam and she can send it out to everyone if that's okay.
And in that regard, the moratoria will serve to preserve the status quo. So it just puts a pause, and then you guys will still have to go through the public hearing process and move forward to develop zoning ordinance.
So with regard to that, what is the time frame you would need to actually do that language? And also, I know that tonight you certainly, in terms of the zoning part of it, and maybe I should just add, I think just relegating it just to two, like way outside the city, puts many probably businesses at a disadvantage. So open to looking at places outside neighborhoods, so it's not concentrated in neighborhoods. But I think that if we could do some type of overlay that kind of says we're in other business quarters, because I know that's part of the legislation that New York State says that they can be in business quarters, that we should be able to look at that as well.
With respect to moratorium, if that's the council's wish, we could have that prepared for Monday and you could move that forward. I do think that with respect to the zoning changes, it would probably take approximately 3 months to move through that process. We would need some direction from the council about how they would want to move forward with that, so we can draft an ordinance that reflects the council's wishes, or with the mayor's consent involving the Department of Development to work on drafting that for recommendations as to what the revisions to the zoning ordinance should look like.
Ms. Williams?
Is that a conservative timeline, or is that like as soon as possible?
The changes, the reality is that the changes are relatively minor. I mean, we already have the framework in place. So, this is just some tweaks to the existing zoning ordinance to add definitions, to add some parking restrictions, to add, some queuing language, and then change the zoning map of the city. So, it's not a heavy lift.
Does that have to go to the planning commission for recommendation?
It is a discretional referral, if I recall, to the planning commission.
I'm sorry, could you just explain what that is?
Sure. You guys may choose to refer any proposed zoning amendments to the planning commission for their opinion as well. It is not required, though.
That just could add some time depending on council meetings and their meeting schedule.
Excuse me, Ms. Brinkley?
Yes.
Can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
So you mentioned the adult use aspect of the, when you were talking about the zoning overlay. And so would that just be for this cannabis, or, there's other businesses that are just adult use, such as alcohol, liquor stores, et cetera. So if one was to pass something like this, does that then set a precedent around other types of businesses outside of cannabis? And what does that mean in terms of future economic development and small business development within the city?
So it would be specifically defined to just include what the council wanted to include. So I think that just from a zoning law perspective, the cannabis and the tobacco uses are somewhat distinctive from a liquor store. But if the council wanted to include liquor stores in that adult use overlay, it certainly has the right to do that. The smoking uses are largely similar, so I would lump them together. And then you have the drinking uses. It would not include, it wouldn't include other adult establishments. Those are already provided for in the zoning ordinance unless the council wanted to change that. And they are already restricted to the institutional or the manufacturing districts. Adult entertainment uses.
Yes.
And would we need to revisit anything if and when the other aspect of this is the lounges, which we obviously haven't gotten to yet, and I think it would be a while before the state gets to it as well, given how this rollout has.
It would be my recommendation to include those in whatever zoning amendments we're making, the consumption aspect of it.
I think it would be worthwhile to look at a zoning map of the city, because I think some of these M1 and M2 zones would surprise you as to their locations within the city. I obviously don't know all of them, but like I said, the one smack right at the bottom of Broadway Hill, that's not out of the area. I mean, Maxon Road is okay, I will concede is on the outskirts, but there are other areas within the city that would fall in this category. So I think it's worth looking at before creating an entire new zoning level. This may perhaps fit the need.
I have one more question. Did
Yes.
you, by any chance, obviously I think we all heard complaints when the cannabis store first opened, but I've been monitoring it almost daily. And, clearly the line has dissipated. I myself haven't been getting any, more complaints since that first few weeks of the store being in business. So I just want to know if you had gone back and spoken to any business owners or other people. I'm totally, the youth aspect of this, obviously, I completely support the idea of not being near youth zones, and of course that's part of the regulations to begin with. But I was just wondering if you'd heard other complaints more recently from business owners.
Yeah, there's still ongoing complaints with parking and with people lining up. when I went by last week, there was a line. So maybe we're going at different times, but I think it depends when you're there. There's lines and there's not. And I think there's still concerns as to the parking. And of course, not everybody is bad. No matter what you do, there's like 1 out of 10 is going to be not conforming to appropriate behavior. So, but it's smack in a commercial zone with small businesses. So, you know, and you could get that if it was people lining up for a tennis shop. You know, so you know, to be fair to the cannabis shop, I mean, I think you get that regardless. But I do believe with the emphasis with the school, the dance studio, some of the other aspects, the negative aspects towards the parking and some of that, those type things, I think it's worth looking at.
Just to be clear, regardless of what we do with the zone going forward, it will not impact that location.
That one
because they're already
particular,
there.
I figured that.
Yeah, so, yes, Mr. Farley.
So I'm just, has anyone spoken to the shop in question, like directly? Because I know that we probably talked to other businesses, people can forward. Have we talked to the owner of that particular shop?
I have not, but I know the mayor and the police chief have. And he's trying to do the right thing. I'm not attacking Mr. Andrews. Let me just be clear on that. No, I just want to make that clear. Yeah, he's opening, he's got a business, it's a legal business, he's doing the best he can. But, you know, there are issues with the other businesses around there. And how do we balance that to make everybody happy?
So I was mentioning that because I was going to say there might be some things that are within his control that he can, you know, and I wonder if maybe helping facilitate a conversation with him and other business owners to see, you know, because sometimes their perception might be he's making some decisions and that's why it looks like this, and then the reality might be there's legal things that he has to adhere to, which is producing this result that they might deem undesirable, and maybe with understanding that, then, you know, they could do that, you know, have a different perspective. Because again, I just want to, you know, I know that is a small business owner operated by a person of color. I don't know how many businesses on that strip is owned by people of color or people from marginalized communities, and I think that, again, the entire discussion background of this is about, you know, addressing some of those things. So if we're not asking those intentional questions and maybe having lengthier conversations and adding in a new lens to look at what's existing, then we run the risk of perpetuating a problem that this is trying to solve. And I want to say, if we understand that as a council, then that's how we have to be making our decisions, even when it's uncomfortable to bring up and talk about. We still need to do it.
Did you have something to say?
Yep, and I would say also completely restricting that access to our downtown area, which is clearly one of our biggest selling points within the city, should require a lot of in-depth conversations, which, to your point, Mr. Palomini, is a direct reflect of just our immediate perceptions to this one store. So.
Okay, so and just for the record, there's a lot of zoning stuff actually. You could like probably do with a whole new zoning for the city, because there's a lot of things that are currently zoned one way that with the way our city is changing over the years. It's been a couple decades, I think. How many?
2008 was the last.
Okay, that we haven't had a overall zoning. So this is probably going to come up a lot. So maybe we should just put in your minds that we should think about doing an overall zoning throughout the entire city. Not right at this moment, but something to consider in the very near future. So at this point, again, the question, so yes, we need to, I would say what input do you need from the council in terms of the zoning? What do you need to move forward on that?
So with respect to the zoning, we largely need direction on what path the council wishes to choose in order to draft ordinance. So just to clarify, there's the path where you choose what district that those uses are going to be permitted in or not permitted in, or the overlay path, which allows greater flexibility to allow that use in multiple different zoning districts, but restricting the geographic area in that district. So it essentially floats over the existing zoning. versus making those uses only permitted in the C1, 2, and 3, or the M1 and 2, or just the M1. So those are two paths that the council can take. And then, the rest of it would be, the parking, which we would need, a planner to give some recommendations on. And if there would need to be any language with respect to outdoor queuing of those uses and the lines. And then any other, any other reasonable restriction with respect to the look and the exterior, the aesthetics. And then with respect to the smoke shop, specifically smoke vape non-cannabis uses, the restrictions that are available are much higher. So we can add footage restrictions, we can do those types of amendments to the ordinance that parallel maybe what the state is doing with the cannabis licensing. So those are the directions. And then with respect to the moratoria, that is largely something that's going to be a creature of law, and the law department can draft that if that's what the council wants.
So this is really up for discussion. So at this point in time, if the council so chooses, we can decide to move forward with at least the moratorium if that's what the direction we want to move in. Or I wanted to know from you, Mr. Marmy, how, like, if we decided we wanted to look at both, is that just too much to ask? To look at the district versus the overlay?
So if you want to put the moratorium in place, that pretty much puts a freeze on anything.
Right.
And then the council can weigh and have discussions and weigh the pros and cons. I think in terms of drafting, before we put pen to paper, we're going to want to know what direction the council would like to go in. But certainly you can discuss the pros and cons of either path. Either restricting it just to certain zones and letting it be those zones, or creating this overlay which would float over the existing zones. And truthfully, it is largely a policy decision to do that. It's not a legal question.
So the question is on the table whether we're moving forward or not with to move the moratorium forward or to wait for that at the next committee meeting, which is actually 3 weeks and not 2, because we have the 5th Monday. Yes. If we want to consider that more, or be ready for it. Yes, Mr. Williams.
Well, I think in instances where we can solicit feedback from more partners absolutely puts us in the best position to make the right decision. I was originally opposed to 6 months and was looking to do something a little sooner, just so we can drive home the importance of getting to a decision sooner than later. But I think with respect to making every consideration possible, without continuously delaying this, I think it would be appropriate to get or seek the opinion of the Planning Commission.
In terms of the moratorium?
Not the moratorium, but with moving towards redistricting the zones or the overlays.
Okay, let's see. Mayor?
If the council put into place a 6-month moratorium, moved ahead and then wanted to rescind that in 4 months, they can do that.
That's correct.
So if things move faster, it would be good. What tends to happen is it moves slower and you extend it, and then people could feel aggrieved, and there may be the potential for some litigation there, or less than pleasant outcomes.
Is your hand up? Or are you fixing your
I
shirt?
didn't know if you were going around. If that's what we were doing. So, I mean, I at this point, I just wouldn't be comfortable with moving forward with that, just until I think that there's some questions that would have to be answered. And I think that there needs to be some additional lenses that we're looking through, looking at maybe some of the unintended consequences. I think that I would be more comfortable bringing that back and then.
We're talking about the moratorium on the smoke shops.
I'd rather make the, I guess, how I see it is about making right decision rather than the fast decision.
I think I'd like to revisit it. I think that, I mean, for example, the 6 months, it says no new applications for vape or smoke shops and sale of marijuana or marijuana products. I'm not really sure. I mean, that would still be something that has to come down from the Office of Cannabis Management anyway, right? In terms of giving a license to someone to sell cannabis, as opposed to the illegal activity that's happening, which obviously is an enforcement issue and not a, I mean, that,
So the licensing is distinct and separate from somebody's ability to seek a land use approval within a municipality. So the city council is within its authority to suspend the use entirely. They can still work to get their licensing with the state, but it's distinct and separate from any individual's permission to operate a business in the city.
so we put the 6 months in with this language, doesn't change anything around someone being able to legally open a marijuana store, a cannabis dispensary.
It does. They could not legally open a cannabis retail store in the city of Schenectady. Freeze, completely frozen. The state's license doesn't override the municipality's ability to decide where things are going to go within their jurisdiction.
Well, that's the zoning piece. But in terms of the moratorium as presented here, it does. I mean, the zoning is different from this. They're two separate kinds of
They are.
things.
The zoning is what gives you permission to have your business here in the city.
I mean, I'm definitely in favor of trying to curb what's happening with the rise in the number of smoke shops and the vaping and the youth that are being affected by that. I'm not so sure. I don't know. I still need some time to think about it.
Mr. Motivaro?
Just follow up on, you think about the moratorium?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, as the mayor mentioned, there is enforcement going on in terms of bringing these shops into
Right.
compliance. So why don't we allow the mayor and the staff to look at that enforcement and to make sure all these businesses come into compliance in terms of getting their license, their certificate of use and being compliant.
Yeah.
And if they're not, they then will have to, consequences of either doing the right thing or go to business. Because if we were to do the moratorium, we just shut down every business.
No.
Unless we just specify.
It's not
Small shop
affecting, it's not
only.
affecting current businesses. It's just new, like what we did with the convenience stores. It's not impacting current businesses.
It would only be new businesses and new businesses that are going through the proper process.
Right.
So it's not going to address businesses that are opening up illegally, and it will not do anything to impact existing businesses.
Okay, that's a good
And you may
clarification.
choose, you can still move forward with zoning discussions even if you don't have a moratorium.
Yes.
The moratorium is optional. It's just to preserve the status quo and generally prevent what we consider that rush where, developers are running into City Hall to get their permits before the city changes the zoning.
Did you have anything further?
No, just add to that. I mean, you mentioned about us overreaching. Sensitive of not being one overreach and do something that, is there a problem? Yes, there's a problem, but then there are enforcement going on right now to curb that. So allow that to work and put these things in place and to address these things.
I'm going to back up and say, I mean, because I wasn't really thinking in terms of the new aspect of this. So in terms of new shops opening, I don't think that in terms of the cannabis shops, I don't know how that, it's going to be a while before we probably even see another license in the city of Schenectady, but
I don't know that to be a fact.
I don't
that
either,
there's,
but-
let me tell you, there's people that are currently looking. So I don't know
to
what.
get licenses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so I don't know what the time frame is because I haven't had those discussions with anyone, but I do know that there are entities out there that are trying to get cannabis licenses. So which is why we need to have our zoning in place so we can figure out and make sure that they're in places and.
Again, I see that as a separate, the zoning I see as a little bit of a separate thing, but I do think that obviously we have to cut back on the number of these smoke and vape shops that are opening all over everyone's neighborhoods. So I see this, I mean, in that sense, I could see supporting the 6-month moratorium on new smoke and vape shops.
I think part of the problem is that some of them don't even go through the process.
Well,
So
right,
it's-
but that's
it's not like
where
it's not
the
like
enforcement aspect of the current ones especially has to happen. I think that's what Ms. DeToro was mentioning in terms of what's happening currently.
Absolutely.
That's where the moratorium would be handy. It would allow the city an opportunity to go through, identify those businesses that are operating illegally,
Right.
have them addressed, not impact the smoke shops that are doing the right thing, and then also give us time to figure out, all right, there's X in this neighborhood, X in this neighborhood, where do we need to put them, and so forth. So that moratorium buys the council time in order to address those issues. And it really is not a overreach. Like I said, there's case law that will support the city on that. So I think the moratorium itself would not impact the current businesses, allow us to enforce, but also address how many we have in each neighborhood so we can create a proper zoning.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be-
One more thing, because I don't think probably any of us except you and maybe Mr. Palmetti, I don't know about Mr. Mudavera, were here when you did a previous moratorium on the convenience stores, right? So I just also, I mean, we have to be, I feel we have to be careful around precedent setting as well, because there's future councils, let's put it that way, around judgment calls and values calls around types of stores that might open. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
You're correct. I mean, because we have passed previously a moratorium on convenience stores, and we have seen the same thing happen with one of us. It doesn't stop. So let's not overreach. I mean, most of these what we're talking about, these smoke shops are illegal business setup.
Yeah.
So let's curb them. Moratorium is not going to stop anyone from opening up a store, a smoke shop. They're going to still continue opening up.
Well,
So
no,
we need the enforcement.
they can't if we don't the
Yeah,
moratorium.
we need the
Well-
enforcement.
But I think, sorry to interrupt you, just to be clear, he's saying these stores aren't going through the process. They're not going to the
They're not
planning
going-
commission. They're not coming through. They're just putting a sign up and said, I'm here, and they're open.
So illegal ones would still continue to open, is I guess what I'm
More
hearing you
likely
say.
than not.
That's the enforcement issue.
And that's what I'm talking about, the aggressive enforcement, allow that to work and bring them in.
Like that's kind of graduated intervention, I think is the best way to do this, right? So right now, we have existing things to hold businesses accountable to. Let's enforce what is on the books now to see where that puts us before we start to create new, creating another intervention, especially if our main problem is that they're operating illegally. Well, they can't do that now anyway. We don't need a moratorium to tell them that they can't do that now. So we enforce what's on the books now, and I think that again gives us time to be mindful of some of the unintended consequences that might happen if we don't go with a graduated intervention.
Mr. Palmer.
If we do have a moratorium in place and smoke shops open, we know automatically they're illegal. It makes it that much easier to enforce while also enforcing what's already out there, and then leaving the legal businesses to do what they need to do and operate properly. So it allows us that option of being able to enforce easier, as well as cleaning up what's already there. That's really one of the nice things of the moratorium is if I open up an illegal smoke shop tomorrow and there's a moratorium in place and people in the neighborhood see it, they automatically know I'm illegal. so it's easy to enforce. And then we can, at the same time, enforce those that we have to do the paperwork and find the paper trails.
Mr. Farley?
But I also think that we have a responsibility to encourage businesses to open up here in the city. And I think that if someone is opening a legal business in the city and kind of to the mayor's point is playing by the rules, and I think that, you know, that's fine. And if someone plans on opening up a business and is going to play by the rules, follow the things that are set in place for them, then I would really not want to do anything to discourage anyone from opening a business here, as long as they're doing the right thing. So I don't think that, I just think that based on what I'm hearing, it just seems like there's things that we have to likely address some of the smoke shops that are existing, whether they're legal, especially if they're illegal. And I think that we go with that first before we see, you know, move into something that is to Corporation Council, where I believe it was drastic, or is how
What was law considers it's a drastic remedy?
It's a drastic remedy? Yeah, I think that we should probably avoid that. Let's start where we're at now before we get to a drastic remedy.
Yes, Mr. Jar.
So even Mr. Mudavarun just stated that it is a problem and it's troubling here in the city. So this is just a pause. It's going to be 3 months, 6 months, with the 6 months on it, just to see. I mean, how many more do you want on Van Franken Avenue? I mean, just for instance, I mean, would you be opposed to 5 more smoke shops opening there? I want every business in the city to succeed. I want small businesses, large businesses. That's what we need to keep our city together as it is and moving forward, and that's a good thing. But this is a problem. Vaping, where children have access to it, children see it. I mean, I'm just saying, this is a pause.
I couldn't.
Whether it's overreactive or not, it's a pause. It's a small pause, so that us as a council can get together and decide what we'd like to see moving forward. And again, I think Governor Hochul said there's 1,500 unlicensed smoke shops and vape shops in New York City. Granted, it's a lot bigger than here. But still, without a moratorium on this, then we can see who's opening up, close them down right now, and give the businesses who do everything legally and open up their shops the chance to stay open and succeed versus an illegal shop 2 doors down. Who's taking business away from them? That's
Mr. Palomini has.
No, yeah, it takes some months for a business to open anyway. So if they go through the legal process, it's going to be a few months before they open. If there's somebody already in the hopper, we could address that and let them open up and be excluded from the moratorium. But if we have the 6-month moratorium, we finish in 4 months, we can say it's done. Anybody wants, during that time, it would probably take that long for a new business to open anyway. So we're not going to impact people who want to do the right thing and do things legally. So that process does take time, and that moratorium wouldn't really impact those people.
Well, just to be clear though, if we're having a moratorium, then people, Mr. Marnie, cannot even submit an application. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So they would not even be able to
saying
submit an
somebody is
application.
like ready to meet with the planning commission now. They already have their application in. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about new applications. Just to clarify, because I understand what you're saying.
Most of the moratoria have a hardship component to them. So an applicant could come to the council and apply for, I guess you could call it a variance from the moratorium. And anybody who's acquired a vested right to the use would be able to continue to pursue that use, regardless of the moratoria. And that usually means that they've started substantial construction. They've started substantially opening that business.
And there is one site in the city that is in that position.
There is one site?
Yes.
Mr. Farley?
So just for clarity, to my fellow council members, so what we're saying is that our concern is illegal smoke shops or are we concerned, are we saying that we don't want people to open up legal smoke shops, and even if they follow the thing? Like, I'm trying to make sure that I understand what we're saying, Mr. Turtle. Like, so you're saying that, like, the issue that you're seeing is illegal smoke shops, or the issue that you're seeing is legal smoke shops?
Oh, you can go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
So anyway, I'm saying we take a pause and we find out what we're doing. Of course, we don't want anyone to open any illegal business because that affects a lot of different taxes, revenue, things like that, and we don't want that happening in our city. But I want to make sure that the smoke shops that are opening are doing it correctly, legally, and, you know, and I want to know.
So it would be all smoke shops,
So you're
not
saying all,
he's asking whether
right.
it be illegal or legal. It's
You're
obviously
saying all.
all.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
all because you would work on zoning, you make sure
Right.
there's X amount per neighborhood or whatever, per block, like we did with the convenience stores. So it's similar in nature to that of, yeah, we want to address the illegal ones, but also make it, have a way to let people open up legal shops in an appropriate manner that's good for the city and for the neighborhoods.
Ms. Williams?
But I would say our opportunity to preemptively address this was by opting out, which the council chose not to do. So at this current state, we're responding to a different situation, which is why I think it's our responsibility to proceed with a certain amount of caution.
It's a different issue.
It is. It is a different issue because the opting out was for, that only
Cannabis.
was about cannabis.
Hmm?
And we really are trying to talk about, I think here, at least on Ms. Totoro's piece, it's about the smoke shops.
So what I'm hearing, the suggestion is that we first of all look at this list, which has 28, which may probably be more, and find out which of these actually, based on what the mayor's saying, is actually even legal to be open in the first place. I'm guessing some aren't. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing some aren't. And then to look further in terms of, this is what I'm hearing, to look further in terms of whether or not we pursue the moratorium. So is that the sense of what everyone feels right now? Because we've had a long discussion about this. And
You haven't said what you are in favor of.
Well, I'm in favor of actually looking, because I see smoke shops popping up all over the place. I do wonder if they've gone through the process. I'm thinking most of them haven't. So I'd like to see for us, first of all, to see if the ones that we have are even legal, and do we start there by just shutting those down? And does that already like weed out, oh, no pun intended, does that already get rid of some of the ones within the neighborhoods? So, because, you know, in my discussion, you know, with Mr. Marnie, we had talked about moratorium, he told me the pros and the cons of it. So, at this point in time, I think we really, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm wondering if I would prefer that we go ahead and look through this list.
Okay.
Oh, it's in a January email that we got way a while back. And so it probably needs to be updated at this point.
There's probably,
Yeah.
I mean, that's 7 months ago, so
Yeah.
there's probably a heck of a lot more that have opened, right?
Right. And to go through and see which of those are actually legally even open.
We wouldn't, I mean,
That would be the code enforcement and the mayor's staff doing that. And then we can certainly revisit this in, it would be 3 weeks, not 2. Yeah. So this is actually, so what is your pleasure, folks?
I agree with that.
That we bring this back? And in terms of, did you have a question?
I'm not sure how much we can get done, well, I don't know, in 3 weeks, around looking at the,
In 3 weeks? Oh, I started to say that we can get a lot done, but that's me speaking for someone else.
So I guess I'm unclear then, with respect to the, is does the council wish to move forward with a moratorium?
I'm hearing that, what I'm seeing and hearing is that people want to see what the ones that we have, are they legal, illegal? And then do we, find out which one of those needs to be shut down? And is that as much of a problem as we think it is?
So I'll clarify the moratorium and the zoning changes are not to combat illegal uses.
That will not.
It does not combat illegal uses.
Right, it's only legal
It is
uses.
only for coming up with a path for lawful uses and new businesses moving forward. So I wouldn't count on that as being a way to combat any businesses that have illegally open. That's a separate enforcement issue. So I guess I'm clear then what the council would direct the law department to do.
I guess
Ms. Patrick.
I would support the moratorium, and then at the same time, just as Mr. Palomini said, it gives this the time to be doing what you're suggesting, which is then the work around, the ones that are already open and what's happening illegally. At least it would prevent illegal shops from opening. I mean, it would.
Legal shops.
Well, we would know that they were illegal.
Well,
We have.
actually, if there was a moratorium
Okay,
in
well,
place, when those illegal shops go to then apply to be legal, they would not be able to because there would be a moratorium. So that would actually have the effect of
I see.
requiring
I
those
thought-
businesses to shut down until
Okay,
there's
I
a
thought you
moratorium.
said that they could still move forward with applying to.
Only lawfully open business or those who have acquired a lawful vested right. If you've opened your business illegally, you do not have a right to continue it under any circumstance.
And I think we're using interchangeable language around legally and in compliance. And I think that if there is a business right now that's open that isn't in compliance, and our code enforcement goes out and says, hey, you're not in compliance, and this is what you need to do to come within compliance and operate as a legal smoke shop, then a moratorium doesn't allow for that to happen. It won't allow them to then remedy whatever the city is suggesting that they do to come in compliance. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you open them lawfully, you've not acquired a right to continue that if there's a moratorium in place. There are only a handful that I am aware of that have followed the correct procedures. Upstate is one of them. And then there are maybe 2 smoke shops that have gone through site plan.
In the field, the zoning office looks for compliance. Absent gross mitigating factors will shut it down immediately. For some reason, you look to have people, again, move through the process, do the appropriate paperwork. Sometimes it's enhanced fees because they haven't done it right. Then again, we look for compliance, absent some other factor that would have just a negative outcome for the business to be in existence.
Understood.
Which would actually speak to the importance of a hardship component to the moratorium. Correct.
So that would all still have to be determined, whether we move forward tonight or not, or wait 3 weeks to bring this back to the table. All of that still would have to be determined, correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we would draft.
For us to consider.
That's Mr. Toro.
And then when Ms. Maiku sends this out for you, there is hardship in here as well, this legislation, or this law that the town of Bethlehem that you said, so there is room for hardship, yeah.
We would also need clarification as to whether or not this is going to include cannabis and smoke shops. Because I
Right.
think we've been conflating the two.
Right.
They are similar uses, but they are 2 separate uses, and these types of things do need to be specific.
Yes. Good. Mr. Toro.
In the recommendation here that Mr. Toro submitted, it has the unregulated marijuana market, and so I think that can push us into kind of that space where we start to conflate the two, because this moratorium will be only on smoke shops, right?
That would be for the council to decide, because those are similar uses, the cannabis retail, cannabis consumption, and you're contemplating zoning changes for all of those uses.
This says
For
right.
tobacco, for smoke, for vape, and for
Do you
cannabis.
see what I'm saying? So like just in what's submitted, it says It says the unregulated marijuana market poses a health risk and doesn't contribute to the tax base
Right.
and is connected to higher rates of crime. So,
But the final recommendation does include marijuana.
I'm sorry?
Look at the last paragraph. Does include the sale of marijuana and marijuana products.
Precisely what I'm saying.
Well, that's what I was bringing up earlier.
The
that
final-
we
the final
have
rec-
to have clarification around
Right,
the difference
right.
between a cannabis dispensary and a
Correct.
smoke shop.
Correct. We're saying the same
Yeah.
thing, actually.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So I definitely wouldn't move forward with monitoring without
But
really
like,
spicing it
sorry.
out.
So, okay, yeah, I don't think I heard what you said.
I was saying that so I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward with that until we're able to really, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable adopting this language as it exists here. Like, I think that just the language within itself does conflict the two. Not to say that they're not connected, and just to be extremely clear, I think what you're bringing forth here is valuable and is a quality of life issue for the people in the city. So I want to be clear about that. But I do believe that we need to make clear distinctions, and I don't think that this does that.
Ms. Patrick, did you have something else?
Well, I think
Okay.
I think that what I'm hearing, is that we would have that clarification given to us in 3 weeks by the law department in terms of the language. Is that what I just heard?
We would clarify the language. I would pull, these types of ordinances, we have access to databases that tell us what needs to be in them. So we would pull that together. The Bethlehem ordinance is professionally drafted, and that's probably good.
So we get to see that. Yeah.
Mr. Palomini?
First off, you can decide it now. If you don't want the cannabis shops in there, you can take it out of the moratorium and just make it smoke shops. As far as the unregulated cannabis, they're illegal by definition anyway, so
Right,
we don't
right.
want them
That
operating
doesn't-
because that's counter
right.
to
That's right.
to the whole purpose of having legalized cannabis shops.
Right.
So if you're opposed to cannabis shops, then that's something you can take out of the moratorium on smoke shops, and that's what we would decide. So we don't need to wait 3 weeks to decide that. We can decide that now, presumably. If everybody's in favor of a smoke shop moratorium and moving forward, then you can tackle the zoning piece of the cannabis shops.
I'm just going on what's in front of me and what was presented.
Okay.
So are we saying that you would come draft something in 3 weeks, we would look at it and then decide, right? That's what we're saying?
No, I think
Well-
they're saying that we could actually just take the language out that we're not agreeing with
And
right
then-
now
and-
here tonight.
So take the
at this
language
table.
out and then adopt this, just minus that language is what you're saying?
Go ahead, Ms.
I would say just give us direction, and we would draft something that you
Right.
would then review and
Right.
adopt.
So-
I'm happy to view that.
So we're not saying, we're just going to sit here and mark this up and then move it forward. That's not what we're saying. But Mr. Martin, are you saying that you would draft this up and then have it to us so we could move on this on Monday if we're in agreement? Is that what you're saying?
We could put this together for Monday.
I'd be okay with that,
With that,
instead of waiting 3 weeks.
Well, we can't vote on it because we're not seeing, we just can't vote through a piece of legislation that we're not seeing. We'd have to wait to see it to make that decision.
Well, you could move it and do it, and then if something's, just pull it from the agenda with we do that pretty regularly.
But we have to discuss
No, I don't
it.
think we do it regularly. What's that?
Or we just have the discussion on Monday. Yeah.
Either one.
So the consideration is that we would have the law department put together a piece of legislation that we could all look at and agree on, come earlier, Monday 7th, so 6:30, to take a look and make sure that we're all comfortable with it. And, what's that?
That's a good idea.
Or let them draft it and then we look at it in 3 weeks. Those are the two things that are being considered at this moment. So, yes.
Yeah, use the Bethlehem as an outline. Is there areas where there's general conceptual agreement, or there's some wording where you don't want, that the law department has
Oh.
more
We have-
firm word choice to work from.
And still,
Huh?
We haven't seen that yet. That's not part of the packet that was given to us tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Sam's going to send it out.
Yeah.
I thought everybody had it tonight.
No.
We don't even
We don't have
have
it.
All right, so folks, are we waiting for 3 weeks for this, or are we waiting till Monday to look at it?
I'm happy to go on Monday.
Take the verbiage out. At the end.
Look at what we see and we'll go on Monday.
I'd like to just make sure again that you're considering the things that, the concerns that are brought forth around unintended consequences and disproportionately impacting certain communities, even with this. So, I don't know if you can do that by Monday, then I'd be happy to look at anything that presented by them.
Mr. Williams, do you have an informant that we can?
I would say similar to Mr. Farley, I would look at anything that's presented on Monday.
So, just be clear, we would have to meet earlier on Monday. We'd have to meet, you would send it out before that, right? And then we would have to, we could recess this and then reconvene and then vote it out after having looked at it, if everyone was comfortable with the language.
we still would need direction about whether or not, what uses are going to be included in the moratorium. So that has not been decided.
Right.
Which section seems to be about cannabis shops, so I would assume that.
Cannabis
It keeps
shops
it
still open.
It seems like we keep bringing it back for more discussion and, oh, there's a lot of it? Oh, okay. Oh. Oh, there's 6 pages.
That one thing.
Yeah. So
But
look,
that's going to get sent out to us anyway.
right.
Seems to be centered on the sale of marijuana, so I think that if you take that out, that would correct.
The Bethlehem?
I'm just looking at this piece.
What was given to us tonight.
Right. 'Cause I just wouldn't.
Okay. Well, it's 6 pages. I didn't realize it was 6 pages long. For some reason, I just thought it was 1 or 2. 6 pages. So I definitely want to,
Very thorough.
yeah, it is, to be able to go through this and then see what the law department has before I can make, even decide what part of this I would want to see in there, quite frankly. So,
Or are we in agreement to meet on Monday and review it all? Or does that still not give you enough direction?
right, it doesn't. I don't think it does.
Unless there are, substantive changes. Largely the language in here is pretty, it's pretty standard.
Okay, sure, please, of course.
Ours will be done by ordinance, not local
I beg your pardon?
law. Ours will be done by ordinance, not local law.
Hmm. Well, for me, this was a discussion whether we want to move forward or not. I want to look at what's been presented with us to see what we do on that in terms of that. So that's where I am right now. And I would be willing to look through that and to come back in 3 weeks. I'm willing to do that. It's a lot to consider. I don't want to rush into it. I don't think, hopefully, that's not going to be a major problem. Because I'm on the same page with you. We both wanted to see a moratorium. I just want to make sure
Thank you, yes.
that we're just taking everything into consideration, so.
Let's pass on Monday, would be a call for public hearing then.
We'd have to have a call for a public hearing?
Or first, public hearing, if it's going to be either local law or ordinance.
Yeah.
So we have to have calls. Right now, we have to call for a public hearing even on this before we,
It is an ordinance, it would be an ordinance.
so we can call for the public hearing and that would give us time. Okay. So again, okay. So we can call for the public hearing on that. And then that will still give us time to have the law department put together something, all of us to take a look at it. And out in time for the public hearing as well. All right? Is there anyone that objects to that, moving forward in that way? Okay. So in that case, for the City Development and Planning Committee, then we need someone to make a motion to call for a public hearing for a possible moratorium on smoke shops.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is amending Resolution 2023-136, endorsing the Schenectady Inner City Ministries application. As you remember, a couple weeks ago, they came to us and asked us to support their application to New York State. Unfortunately, the name of the grant that they were asking for, they put in the wrong grant name. So now we just need to amend that language and put in the correct grant name so that when it's being reviewed by the committee, that they make sure that the letter that we're sending to support it, the resolution that we're sending to support it, is specifically for that grant. Does anyone have questions about that?
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The last item is to amend the collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME, Local 66, Local 1037A. Says Mr. Colden, but Mayor, you'll be taking care of that. And did you need that in executive session?
Yes.
There may be questions that would be raised in executive session that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Council.
All right. Before we go into executive session, though, I do want to mention one other thing under City Development and Planning. I believe that all of you received the email regarding the speeding on Becker Street. We're hearing that over and over again. This time there was an accident, and I guess maybe 3 weeks ago a child was hit. So I don't know that we can remedy this. Obviously, we can't remedy this very quickly is what we would like to do. But I don't know what the measures are, but I think we need to take some measures. I know we talk about, the traffic study, et cetera, and so on, but there's some clear indications that we're having major problems around speeding within the city, especially those stretches of road that have almost no stop signs. So just wanted to, let everyone know, if you haven't looked at your email, take a look at the email. There's a car in someone's house. So we definitely need to, address it. They've been coming from Kings Road, and, we're hearing here, we've heard it all over, and we've heard it in the past, but we really have to get a handle on what's going on here. So just wanted to remind everyone to be thinking about that and what we can do about that. With that, I will ask for a motion to go into executive session. So moved.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
An executive session, and public will have to leave.